Imagine it's a normal day in the United States, and you're doing the same work, earning the same paycheck, but everything around you feels more expensive than it used to. Imagine walking into a grocery store and realizing that the total bill is higher, even though you are buying almost the same items you've always purchased. Imagine checking your monthly expenses and noticing that more of your income is being used just to maintain your basic lifestyle at first. It feels like a small change, something that can be managed with slightly better budgeting and more careful spending habits. But over time, this feeling becomes consistent, and it starts to affect how you think about money in your everyday life. You begin to notice that essential expenses are increasing faster than your income, creating a gap that did not exist before. This gap is not always obvious at once, but it becomes clear when you compare your financial situation over a longer period of time. The question that naturally follows is simple. Why does everything feel more expensive while your income remains almost the same? Most people assume that this is just inflation, a normal economic process that causes prices to rise gradually over time. But the reality is more complex, because the relationship between prices and income is no longer moving at the same pace. And this difference is what creates the feeling that money is losing its effectiveness in everyday situations. To understand this clearly, you have to look at how income and expenses have evolved over the past few decades in the modern economy and earlier periods. Income growth was more closely aligned with increases in the cost of living for the average household. This meant that even as prices increased, wages also adjusted in a way that maintained a relatively stable balance. But over time, this relationship began to change, and the gap between income growth and cost increases started to widen gradually. Today, many essential expenses are rising faster than wages, creating pressure that is felt across different income groups. This change does not happen suddenly, but slowly, making it difficult to notice in the early stages. Because each increase feels small on its own, the overall impact is only recognized after it accumulates over time. This is why the situation feels confusing, because nothing drastic has changed, yet everything feels harder to afford. The system has shifted in a way that reduces purchasing power without creating an immediate visible shock, and this subtle shift is what makes the problem more difficult to understand and respond to effectively. One of the main drivers of this change is inflation, but not in the simple way that it is often explained. Inflation is usually presented as a general increase in prices across the economy, but in reality it affects categories unevenly. Essential goods and services such as housing, food, and healthcare tend to increase at a faster rate than other expenses. These are the categories that people cannot easily reduce or avoid, making their impact much more significant. At the same time, wages do not always adjust quickly enough to match these increases in essential costs. This creates a situation where a larger portion of income is required just to maintain the same standard of living as a result. Even small increases in essential expenses can have a noticeable effect on financial stability. Because these expenses are recurring, their impact compounds over time, making the situation feel progressively worse. This is why people feel the pressure more strongly, even if overall inflation numbers appear moderate. The experience of inflation at the household level is very different from how it is measured at the economic level. Another factor that contributes to this feeling is the way income is structured in the modern economy. For many people, wages are relatively fixed, especially in jobs where raises are small and infrequent. This means that income does not adjust quickly in response to changes in the cost of living. Even when raises occur, they often lag behind the actual increase in expenses that people are facing. This delay creates a period where financial pressure builds before any adjustment is made, and in some cases, the adjustment never fully catches up to the rising cost of living. This creates a long-term imbalance where income growth consistently trails behind expense growth. Over time, this imbalance reduces the ability to save, invest, and maintain financial flexibility. It also increases reliance on credit as a way to bridge the gap between income and expenses. This dependence on credit introduces another layer of cost that further reduces financial stability. Debt plays a critical role in maintaining the illusion that everything is still manageable despite rising costs. When expenses increase beyond what income can support, credit allows people to continue spending at the same level. This creates the appearance that financial conditions are stable, even though the underlying situation has changed. But this stability is temporary, because debt must eventually be repaid with interest over time. As debt increases, a portion of future income is committed to servicing it, reducing financial flexibility. This creates a cycle where borrowing becomes necessary to maintain current living standards. And over time, this cycle becomes harder to sustain as costs continue to rise steadily. This is one of the reasons why financial stress increases even when people are still earning the same income. The system allows the problem to continue without immediate consequences, but the pressure builds in the background. And when that pressure reaches a certain point, it becomes much harder to manage effectively. Another important element is how prices are presented and experienced in everyday transactions. Many costs are not increased all at once, but are adjusted gradually through smaller changes over time. This includes things like reduced product sizes, higher service fees, and additional charges that were not present before. Because these changes are small and spread out, they are less noticeable individually in daily life. But when combined, they create a significant increase in the total cost of living over time. This process makes it difficult for people to identify exactly where their money is going. It also makes it harder to adjust behavior because the changes are not always clear or predictable. This adds another layer of complexity to managing finances in an environment where costs are constantly shifting. And this complexity contributes to the feeling that money is becoming less effective over time. Even though income remains the same, its ability to cover expenses continues to decline gradually. As this gap between income and expenses continues to grow, another deeper pattern begins to take shape inside the economy that most people do not immediately recognize. This pattern is not about a single price increase, but about how the entire system slowly adjusts in a way that puts more pressure on individuals over time instead of one major change. It is a series of small adjustments that collectively reduce your financial comfort without making it obvious at first. Because these changes are gradual, they do not trigger immediate concern, and people adapt their behavior instead of questioning the system itself. This adaptation creates the illusion that everything is still manageable, even though the underlying pressure continues to build. Over time, this pressure begins to affect not just spending, but also saving, investing, and long-term financial planning. People start focusing more on short-term survival rather than long-term growth, which changes how money is used in everyday life. This shift may seem subtle, but when it happens across millions of households, it begins to reshape the economy itself. And this is where the real impact becomes more visible. Not as a sudden crisis, but as a slow transformation of financial behavior. One of the key reasons behind this transformation is how productivity and income growth have become disconnected over time. In theory, as productivity increases, wages should also rise, allowing workers to benefit from economic growth. But in reality, productivity has increased faster than wages for many years, creating a gap between output and compensation. This means that even though the economy is producing more value, that value is not distributed evenly across all participants. A larger portion of economic gains is concentrated at higher levels, while average wages grow more slowly. This imbalance contributes to the feeling that people are working just as hard, but not seeing the same financial progress. It also explains why the cost of living can increase even when income growth remains limited, because prices are influenced by overall economic activity, not just individual wages. This creates a situation where the system grows, but individual financial stability does not improve at the same pace. And over time, this gap becomes more noticeable in everyday life. Another factor is the role of housing, which has become one of the largest and fastest growing expenses for many households. Housing costs have increased significantly in many areas, often outpacing income growth by a wide margin. This means that a larger portion of income is now dedicated to securing and maintaining a place to live. Because housing is a necessity, people have limited ability to reduce this expense without making major lifestyle changes. As a result, increases in housing costs have a direct and immediate impact on financial stability. Even small increases in rent or mortgage payments can create noticeable pressure on monthly budgets. This reduces the amount of income available for other expenses, savings, and investments. And because housing costs are recurring, their impact continues over time without decreasing. This is one of the main reasons why people feel that everything is becoming more expensive, because a large portion of their income is already committed before other expenses are considered. Healthcare is another area where costs have increased steadily, adding to the overall financial pressure experienced by individuals. Medical expenses are often unpredictable, making it difficult to plan for them in advance. Even with insurance, out-of-pocket costs can be significant, especially for unexpected treatments or emergencies. This creates a situation where a single event can have a major impact on financial stability. Because healthcare is essential, people cannot simply avoid these costs when they arise. This adds another layer of uncertainty to financial planning, making it harder to maintain stability over time. As healthcare costs continue to rise, they contribute to the overall feeling that money is not going as far as it used to. And because these costs are not always visible until they occur, they create additional stress when they appear. This reinforces the perception that financial pressure is increasing even if income remains unchanged. And this perception is based on real experiences that people face in their daily lives. Another important element is the way consumer goods and services are priced in the modern economy. Companies often adjust prices in ways that are less noticeable, such as reducing product sizes or adding hidden fees. This allows them to increase revenue without creating immediate resistance from consumers. Because the changes are subtle, people may not recognize them right away. But over time, these small adjustments add up to a significant increase in overall spending. This process makes it difficult to track how much prices have actually increased. It also creates the feeling that money is disappearing faster without a clear explanation. This lack of clarity makes it harder for people to adjust their financial behavior effectively, and it contributes to the overall sense of confusion about why everything feels more expensive. Even though the changes are real, they are not always easy to identify. Technology and convenience also play a role in increasing everyday expenses in ways that are not always obvious. Many services that were once optional have become integrated into daily life, making them feel necessary. Subscriptions, digital services, and convenience-based spending add recurring costs that were less common in the past. Individually, these costs may seem small, but together they create a significant financial impact over time. Because they are automated, they often go unnoticed until they accumulate into a larger expense. This changes how money is spent, shifting more of it toward ongoing services rather than one-time purchases. As a result, monthly expenses increase without a corresponding increase in income. This contributes to the feeling that money is being used more quickly than before. Even though the lifestyle may not feel dramatically different, the cost of maintaining it has increased. And this increase is part of a broader shift in how consumption is structured in the modern economy. As all of these factors combine, the overall effect becomes more noticeable in the daily experience of managing money. People begin to feel that their income is no longer sufficient to maintain the same level of comfort and stability. This feeling is not based on a single cause, but on the accumulation of multiple changes over time. Each factor adds a small amount of pressure, but together they create a significant impact. This is why the situation feels difficult to explain, even though it is widely experienced, because there is no single point where everything changed, but rather a continuous shift over time. This makes it harder to identify solutions, as the problem is spread across different areas of the economy. And this complexity contributes to the ongoing feeling of financial pressure. People are not imagining the problem, they are experiencing the combined effect of multiple economic changes, and these changes are reshaping how money functions in everyday life. Over time, this leads to a shift in mindset, where financial decisions become more focused on immediate needs rather than long-term goals. Saving becomes more difficult because a larger portion of income is required for basic expenses. Investing becomes riskier because there is less margin for error in financial planning. Spending becomes more controlled, as people try to manage increasing costs with limited income growth. This shift affects not just individual households, but the overall behavior of the economy. When millions of people make these adjustments at the same time, it changes the pattern of economic activity. Growth slows down, not because of a single event, but because of widespread changes in behavior. And this slowdown can continue for extended periods without being recognized as a clear crisis, because it does not feel like a sudden collapse, but rather a gradual tightening of financial conditions. And this is what makes the situation more difficult to respond to effectively. And once you begin to understand this clearly, the feeling that everything is more expensive starts to make more sense. It is not just about prices increasing, but about how the entire system is shifting in a way that changes the value of money over time. Income may remain the same, but its ability to support a stable lifestyle is gradually reduced. This creates the experience of financial pressure even without dramatic changes in earnings, and this experience is becoming more common across different groups of people, which is why it feels like a widespread issue rather than an isolated problem. The system is not breaking suddenly, but it is changing in ways that affect how money works in everyday life. And recognizing this change is the first step toward understanding what is actually happening beneath the surface. Because once you see it clearly, the question is no longer why everything feels expensive. The question becomes how the system changed in a way that made your money feel smaller without changing the number itself.